Well, hey guys, welcome to Conversations. I am continuing the conversation we started last time with my friend Kobi Ferguson. We've been talking about some interesting things about Israel and Jews and Gentiles and how that all fits together. So join us in this week as we press into some fun stuff. Just this whole interaction with Jews and Gentiles, you have to take the whole of Scripture. Psalm says, the sum of your word is truth. You could take proof text and make it mean anything you want.
Right.
The Satanic Church takes proof text out of Scripture to prove that Jesus and Satan are the same person.
Unbelievable.
I'm serious. Because Lucifer, son of the morning, and
Right.
Satan is called that in the Old Testament. Jesus is called that in Revelation.
I have a friend that in Bible college like to call that kind of stuff voodoo exegesis.
Well,
it's kind of a haphazard way of bringing truth out,
But you've got that place, and I think it's in Romans where Paul says, he is not a Jew who is one outwardly,
yes,
but he who is one inwardly. And I know that verse has been used historically by the church for what we call replacement theology.
I mean, you ever have a situation where you see two people interacting or you've been a part of it and you just go, whoa, no, that was a complete misunderstanding.
Yeah.
You didn't hear me right. You didn't understand what I said. And then it gets way blown out of proportion. That's what we're dealing with here. So the simple explanation is because Paul is talking about Israel and the Jewish people. And what he's trying to describe in the book of Galatians is to a bunch of people. Now look, here's the situation with the Jewish people. Some have been born again, or they received the faith, and some aren't. And he wants to make a huge distinction, not to throw away the ones who aren't born again.
Right.
And many of our Jewish brethren, they do not believe. They are adamant that they would never believe, although hey, a lot of people have thought that over the years. But for the most part, for the most part, they're non-believers. So it's not that discussion. It's a discussion to a group of people to say, look, here's the differences. So when he compares the Jewish people who believe and the Jewish people who don't believe, he doesn't all of a sudden jump and say, so Gentiles are Jews. It's like, what? He's making a Jew to Jew comparison. Yeah. So he's saying this. You got two men in the room. One's this big burly guy, one's this little guy, and kind of looks a little wimpy. But the big guy doesn't take care of his family, beats his wife, and the little wimpy guy is just an amazing provider. He loves the Lord. He takes care of his wife, treats her with respect and in a godly way. And you would say, which one is the real man?
Yeah. Which
one in the room is the real man? You'd say, well, the little guy. Even though the big guy looks like one, he's not a real man. Are you kidding me? This is what Paul is saying. He's saying the one who's the real Jew is not just outwardly wearing the things, and he's the one inwardly who has embraced the new covenant, who's embraced the Jewish Messiah. This is the spiritual Jew. Yeah. And so what happened over centuries, people said, oh, it's not just, it's the one outwardly, it's the spiritual Jew, is the one inwardly. Oh, okay. So they confused it and switched a narrative in the middle of his metaphor.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost like we could bring it contextually to our day. I went and visited a church, and in that church, not everybody in that church was saved, even though they called themselves Christians.
Exactly.
Not every Christian is a Christian who's one outwardly, but the one who is inwardly. If you don't actually have a relationship with God, you're not a Christian.
But all of a sudden, you don't hear him. So when we're talking about this, and I go, yeah, they're actually Muslims. You go, what? No, you just jump to a conclusion we weren't even talking about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that you can't use that conversation to say that someone, and let's just use, since it was brought up, somebody that's Muslim, that is, maybe they're a good person. That doesn't make them a Christian.
Exactly. Yes.
So
it's an apples to apples comparison. Exactly. Paul's trying to say the real spiritual Jew is the one that is completed, the one that's really fully realized to his maximum identity and potential and destiny, because the destiny of the Jewish people is to be a light to the nations. Yeshua, Jesus, is that light. So how can we spread light unless we have it? Don't let the light in you be darkness.
Yeah.
A lot of people shine light, but it's not even the real light. That's a whole deeper conversation for you to have some other time.
Well, and then you have the whole context of that because you're talking about Jesus's words, where he's talking about that your light is your righteous deeds.
Yes.
And we miss that one quite a bit because we don't actually want to have a standard of righteousness. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Right, but it comes to, and the basis of all of it is that the Lord is light, Jesus is light, and so that light has to shine through these Jewish people in order for them to be a true light to the nations.
Yes.
And so there's another, way we look at the light to the nations on a natural level to say, okay, we have all the, the history of all the breakthroughs in technology and millions of people have been saved, the medical breakthroughs of the Jewish people. You could say, okay, that's kind of like a light to the nations, but that's not the ultimate that we're talking about. It is in Yeshua, it is in Jesus that the Jewish people have been a light to the nations. All the early disciples, all the scriptures. I mean, the foundation of all of it, Jewish men, all the apostles, all the followers, they were all Jewish people in the beginning. So later then the Gentiles have become a part of it. Yeah. And so at no point, and I think Paul began to see these same trends of anti-Semitism, of replacement theology, all these things happening. Supersessionism was what the fancy word for replacement theology. Yeah. All these things were starting to happen in his day in Rome. Yeah. He was starting to see this thing. And he said, do not be ignorant, and think that you support the whole thing. It is the root, the Jewish people, Judaism, like you said, that became actually even later the concept of a Judaism. It was just Jewish followers of Adonai, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then later Jewish followers in Jesus as well. Don't be ignorant to think that you support the faith. It's actually you're grafted into their faith is where you began in the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting. I was doing it. You just made me think of something, a meditation I was having a few months ago because I was going through Romans 9 through 11 again in the context. I mean, because you can't take that passage outside of the whole thing of Romans. Because it's one argument. You see, you got to go clear from the beginning all the way through chapter 16 if you're going to get the understanding. But I was thinking through that in how Paul talks about it. Because I've heard somebody say, well, the root is Israel. But that's not what Paul says. The root is Christ. Israel's the tree, and we're the branches. And so the root is Christ. Out of that root comes the tree, which is Israel. And then the individual believers are the branches that are part of that tree that the Gentiles get moved in, which clarifies something because here's one of the things that I've seen people go on the other side of it. Because you go on one side of this, the truth is replacement theology, where, Judaism has no value. Don't even worry about it. We're just all believers.
Christians are spiritual Jews. Yeah.
And that really, I mean, that came out of Rome trying to culturalize Christianity so that it have more control. I mean, that's the reality. That's where that started, and that's where that gained momentum. And we lost the culture of Judaism, which was the culture of Christianity when it began. But there's a long history.
So there's the one extreme
of going too far. The other extreme is where you have two sets of Christians, two classes of Christians. But, and I've heard, there's the Jewish church and there's the Gentile church, and there's two churches. But Paul didn't say that there will be one new man. He said there is one new man.
Right.
It's one tree built on one root with many branches. And some of those branches are going to be Jew. Some of those branches are going to be Catholic, Orthodox, Baptist, Presbyterian. And it doesn't put them all in equal, but you have the grafted in branches, and there's expressions there's individual identity, but there's one faith, there's one baptism, there's one Lord and God and Father of all.
And I know you've heard it said many times, and I hear it said a lot that, when we're with the Lord, it'll be clear there's not Baptist, Pentecostals,
Right.
Presbyterians. It's just
Right. We're just the church.
Which is really funny because that's what people are so, their identity is all wrapped up into these distinctions. That's where Paul was clear. He even said, there's some people who said, okay, you guys are saying you're of Paul, you're of Apollos. And it was really some of the same concepts we talked about in the book of Galatians. And even some people said, well, we're just of Jesus.
Right.
And he rebuked them too. He said, don't you get it? They're all yours. You can take from every stream.
Yes.
All streams are a part of God's plan. It's great how you said it. It's all part of the root, which is Messiah.
Yeah.
Now Messiah did come from the Jewish people, and he's going to come back to Jerusalem. As much as I love being with you guys here in Dallas, he might come to visit. That little ball thing is mildly interesting. He might come visit that, or he might go to a Cowboys game. I'm being ridiculous. But, I was just in San Diego a few days ago. I think he probably definitely will visit San Diego. Go sit out there. The point is he's setting up his kingdom and his headquarters, let's say in Jerusalem. And so that's what we're looking to. But I think when people begin to go from one side to the other, I think they're and I've seen it a lot. And when I was younger, I began to question too, okay, so I'm here, I'm in Israel, and how does this all fit? And you get the Palestinians, and and it takes time to kind of become the thing in your mind and your heart that you already are.
Yeah.
We're men, but at some point, and when you're growing up and you're becoming a man at 18, 20, 25, 30, there's this kind of process, at least I think from most people that I've talked with, of like, okay, now I'm a man. At what point okay, I'm a man because what, you reached 18? It's just like some kind of arbitrary thing people put on, an age people put on things, for legal purposes. Mm-hmm. But I think you're exactly right. We are one new man, but just as we are married, and it takes time. I don't know anybody. I mean, they're the rare exception that, they just became one instantly. Yeah. It takes sometimes years and sometimes decades to become one with your spouse. And so we are one with our spouse, but it takes time, I think, to embrace the reality of that thing. So the Lord declares a thing, and it is.
It is.
But sometimes it takes time for the reality of that, I think, to manifest. And it's a good point of what you said. We are one, Jew and Gentile. Mm-hmm. But I think it's going to take some time before this unity becomes apparent. And I think when Jewish people, especially the numbers of Jewish believers, grows, then it starts to look a little different. When we start to have national revival in Israel, I think a lot of things will just work out in the Lord's timing. But it doesn't mean we can't try to work these things out, and have conversations like this, because I think it's extremely important.
Oh, we need to.
Because when we have Jewish unbelievers and they meet Christians who understand who they are, they don't have an identity crisis. They know they're loved in the beloved. That's why it's so important for this whole move over the last at least decade of, really declaring from the Song of Solomon's and Song of Songs and all the passages about how much I'm loved and how much the Lord loves me. And it seems, sometimes a little bit much, but it's not, because we need that rooted and grounded, especially the Gentile church, because when the Lord also doesn't ever abandon in Scripture the Gentiles, but when he begins to put world major focus and revival and resources into the land of Israel, the nations could get a little jealous, because it's going to happen, and it's already happened at times. I remember talking to people at Bible school about Israel, and they would say, this was almost 20 years ago, and they would say, well, what are we, chopped liver? Us Gentiles? What are you talking about? We're chopped liver? And I said, no. It's just like when I have 3 daughters, and they're young. When I talk to one, I'll say, hey, come here. You look so beautiful today. And I'll just compliment her. The other two somehow in their minds hear that I'm telling them they're ugly. It's just it's human nature. When you praise one group of people, the green-eyed monster called jealousy is sitting right there to say, you see how much he loves them? That means he hates you.
Yeah.
You see how he said they're beautiful? He's calling you ugly. And I go, knock it off, kids. I just had the same conversation with you yesterday. Yeah, but now you're saying she's beautiful. I'm like, oh, you're all beautiful. Okay, give me a break in. They really are. Our kids are actually dynamic. But it's the same with the Lord. He's like, I love the Gentile. I love you. You're a non-Jewish, person. I mean, whatever. But, he wants to show you, I love you and I have a direct connection, relationship with you forever. And this is a pretty big deal. And I love how the book of Revelation, it says we're going to get a white stone with a new name. And it's like, I have pet names for my wife, and it's not Pookie. It's like we have love, love language between us. And the Lord says it's a name that nobody else will know. That's the other part of that. It's a new name. Yeah. Here, I'm going to give this to you. This is just between us. And so that's hard.
This is what I call you.
This is what I call you. And this is, hey, keep it on the DL. Awesome. Nobody else knows this. So this is the deep, intimate relationship the Lord will have with all of us. And he has now. But he has a specific plan for the Jewish people. And when he begins to do certain things through them, we are not to get jealous. I work a lot with musicians and artists, and that's a big part of what we do in our ministry in Israel. Is we're trying to disciple and develop and raise the level of worship and increase the amount of worship, increase the level of excellence in worship as well. And really just to help develop these artists and help them in their life all the way around, not just in their music, but see that they develop in their relationship with the Lord and as their families. But as we begin to meet these artists, I begin to see, sometimes there's this insecurity that's there, of okay, we want to be seen, but we don't want to be seen. And as we begin to see this dynamic grow, I know that we're going to see more and more of these people come to faith in the Lord, but it's going to take a process, probably more conversations like this.
Yeah. Well, I think you said something earlier that sparked a picture, I think, that would help a lot of us when we're thinking about the Jew and the Gentile church. It's almost like a marriage. When me and my wife got married, we became one flesh. Now we're walking out that reality and we're developing that intimacy, and we're becoming more and more one every day. But when we became one flesh, we didn't have to decide which one of us survived. We both still have our own identity. We both still have our destiny. Well, we have a together destiny, but we each have a destiny. We each have a calling.
That's right.
And that doesn't get swallowed up in the one.
And roles, right?
It expresses, it fulfills, and their individual callings actually help the other calling, but there's something together that we could never do apart. And I think that's the piece.
And my wife is very nurturing. It doesn't mean I can't be nurturing, but that's really not my primary role as father.
Yeah.
And she can be strong. She can be the authoritarian when she needs to be. I mean, anybody met a Jewish woman, they're pretty strong. But that's predominantly my role as father. Mm-hmm. And so we don't. So we can share and blend of roles here and there, but there is a distinction, and there's a plan for the nations. And so that's what I actually try to encourage. I was going to say about these musicians and things people we work with. One of the things we're trying to explain to them is, hey, don't be jealous if one of our people just explodes, goes viral, or something like that. We need to celebrate their successes, and it's hard for us as people to do that. And I think it's just human nature, But if we realize we're all part of the same team, of the same body, if one of my arms becomes like super strong, that's great. That's great for the whole body. I'm not concerned with that, and go, well, I guess I just cut this arm off, like you said before. Well, I don't even need this anymore. It's like,
this one's strong enough.
So we need the different elements working together. And I don't think we've seen that at its fullest by any means, but we're in the beginnings of beginning to see this dynamic. Okay, how does it even work together? Clarifying, I think, centuries of misconceptions, bad theology about the Jewish people. And the Jewish people are the ones who come to the Lord. I think it's taking them time. You have to realize something. It's something that a lot of maybe some of the people watching might not know. When you talk to a Jewish believer, okay, a Jewish person who's come to the Lord, Messianic Jew, that might be called by different things, they might not want to be called Christian, and that could hurt a Christian's feelings. Well, you believe in the same Christ, Messiah, but it just goes back through centuries of misunderstanding. The reason a Jewish person doesn't want to call himself Christian is because the term Christian, for the most part, has become to be known as a non-Jew. And when we're even going into Hebrew, in the language of the people of Israel, it kind of refers to a Catholic person or a monk, even Natsev or something. I remember this guy came to Israel and he was going to do this powerful youth conference, and he basically was saying, we're going to take a Nazarite vow. He wanted to talk about the Nazarites, and the guy translating him, word for word, said, we're going to all be a bunch of monks. And so all the people said, huh? All the youth were confused by it. I said, no, he didn't mean monk. So you almost have to explain the context of what he's saying. So our words are just different because we've been so far apart for centuries. Jews and Gentiles. This is really the first time we've been interacting on a spiritual level with Messiah as the root. Really, for almost 2,000 years, there's always been a contingency of Jewish believers, but it's not been a great number, or they were in hiding, or they themselves were confused about identity. How do I, as a Jewish person, believe in Jesus? Because that's not possible. I must become a Christian. So a Jewish person doesn't need to convert to anything. That's one of the biggest misconceptions we see that we want to clear up. A Jew doesn't convert to Christianity when he comes. Even the nation of Israel needs to be educated about this. They're very confused. Look, Israelis they think it's impossible. I've literally talked to a guy. He was ready to receive Yeshua as his Messiah. But he said, Kobi, some of what you're telling me, though, that I can believe in Yeshua, because he was feeling the presence of God so strongly. And one of your connections, the Moran family in Israel, I worked with one of their amazing daughters, Oriel, and she was helping run a prayer center. And she brought this one guy in, and we talked, and the power of God just was zapping this guy. And at the end of this conversation, he said, for you to tell me I could believe that Yeshua, they call him by other names, he's the Messiah. It's like just saying, okay, let's open this window here and fly to the moon. That's what he told me. It's just as ridiculous sounding. Because to a Jewish person, it doesn't even, it's not possible because a Jew, like you said, the argument is it a race? Is it a religion? Is it a people group? What? A lot of people might argue about what a Jew is, but one of the things the Jews will agree, a Jew ain't a person who believes in Jesus. That's like one of the things they all agree about. So now to tell them, no, Jesus was Jewish. I had one guy who was Jewish said, Jesus was Jewish, and he grew up his whole life thinking there's Catholics and there's Jews. They're like that. He didn't know, grew up in New York. He didn't know there were any other classes of people, any other religions or any backgrounds. And when he learned that Jesus was a Jew, he said it fried his mind. And he said, so when did he become a Christian? After he died? It just was like so confusing. What are you talking about? Jesus was a Jew. And so it's going to take them time to be bridged, because Israel is not just an unreached people group. It's a pre-reached people group, meaning they already have a bias against the faith that we have to work through. And really, it's through the love that the Christian church is showing them. I think when some of these Hebrew roots, Jewish roots people will just knock it off and quit pretending and thinking they're actually Jews, because they're not. They're not a spiritual Jew either. The comment about the spiritual Jew was between a natural and a spiritual Jew. Which one's the spiritual Jew? The one who believes in Jesus. It doesn't say who's the spiritual Jew. The Gentile over here. That's like jumping orbitals, into a different concept altogether. So once these things become clarified and people become really secure in who they are in their faith, Christians really develop this deep relationship with their Messiah, with their Savior, they'll just begin, I think, to see the Jewish people in a new light.
Yeah.
And they'll see Messianic Jews as their real brothers. And that's the dynamic that I would like to communicate to the audience. I want to tell you all that if you're watching this at this point, begin to pray and reach out to Messianic Jews, especially Israeli believers all over, because they don't even know that you care. Many of you do care. Many of you, maybe through this conversation, have had some things come up in your mind, and I encourage people, hey, go study it out. We talked about this earlier. Study it out. Right?
That's the goal of this conversation. Cause you to want to study it out and figure it out.
I asked the guide before I came on a previous trip. I said, hey, you're a good friend of mine for many years, was in the military, an officer in the Israeli Defense Force, a believer, strong believer, one of my closest friends. And I said, give me a message to give as a young Israeli. What can I tell the church in America? And he said, tell them we exist. Tell them we exist, that we're here. They don't even know we exist. They know about the government. They know about Bibi Netanyahu. They know about all these things. And these are all important. Keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem, for the government. But the people?
Yeah.
He said, we're struggling here. They don't even know we exist. They just broke my heart.
Yeah.
And so that's why I go all over the world when I get a chance.
Yeah.
Is to communicate and just say we're representing these people. They're here, and it's a thriving group, and it's growing in the numbers of the youth and young adults in particular, growing, thriving, and we're encouraging the nations of the earth to pour into the next generation of leaders, which is now.
Yeah.
Let's not wait till they're 40 years old. Let's try to start developing that now.
It's now. Yeah. Yeah, there's so much that can be done, because there's this kind of presupposition, I think, in a lot of our audience, because most of you are part of what was at one time the British Empire, and there's, I mean, seriously, most of our audience. I mean, you got England, you got South Africa, you got Hong Kong, you got India, you got Australia, New Zealand. United States, right? Canada, 33% of the landmass of the world was part of the British Empire at its height. 33. I mean, that's
pretty amazing.
But one of the things that the British Empire did is they conquered by culturalizing.
Yes.
By culturalizing. And if we can repent of that mindset.
That's great. That's good. Mark.
And stop trying to
the colonial
culturalize people into Christianity. Stop trying to make their branch look like our branch. And just help them to connect with the root.
And celebrate the differences, right?
And celebrate all those differences, because they're intended to be different. All of the colors, all of the beauty of what God created, it's all essential. And we get mystical and talk about the 72 character name of God, and how there's 72 people groups in Genesis that are mentioned, and each of them bear an aspect of God, and it's all needed for there to be the full praise that's talked about in Revelation, where every tribe, tongue, and nation is talking about the originals.
That's right.
Every single one of them bearing that piece of him that he put in their culture, he put into their bloodline, into who they are, how they were created. All of it is required for the fullness of the praise that God requires, that he is worthy of.
That's right.
To be given. And so we don't need people to look like us. We need people to connect with the root, how they connect with the root.
And that stretches our understanding.
That
makes us humble to realize we're not the center of the universe, whatever background and tribe we're a part of.
Right.
And, we went to Brazil last year, and my wife was speaking with a group of with Brazilian psalmists, just amazingly talented people. You go all over the world and you just see pockets of just amazing, great people. And in particular, she began to hear their worship, and it all sounded like stuff coming from different places here in the U.S. for the most part. Amazing worship here in the U.S.
Yeah.
These people that if I mentioned all the names, probably most of
all
your
know.
audience would know it.
Yeah.
And I'm deeply touched by the music and the songs, but we're in Brazil.
Yeah.
And she just rebuked him as a good Israeli would. She said, "You guys what's wrong with you? You're singing the songs of another land here in Brazil. What about the samba? What about this? What about?" They said, "Well, we've been told that all represents the world and this."
No.
And I said, no. The Lord. So what you just said, the Lord wants to hear the praise come forth in a way that represents that people that He created.
Yes.
And I think it's kind of
He blessed.
it's great. They enjoy this. Do those songs too. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying don't do those as well, but let the expression come forth from your culture.
Yeah.
Your people, your culture, not a colonialized culture.
Yeah. So the world's been telling itself, be yourself. And what that means to them is justify your sin. Just be as sinful as you want to be. But that's not what is intended. That actually is something that God is speaking to the world. Be yourself.
That robs you of your true self. Probably.
Because that would rob you of your true self. But we can't recognize that problem and then run away from it. We actually have to be ourselves. We have to be the true self that God dreamed of before He created anything, because He knew each and every one of us before He formed anything. And He knew us, and the knowing that He had of us is our potential in Him. And we've actually got to let that be, and that's individual, but that's the cultures, that's the nations, the world. And whether we're talking about Israel, and that's one of the things I love about your wife's worship, is it sounds like Israel. It doesn't sound like all the other.
Well, that's one of the things that people don't know is that Israel, they're thinking of American Messianic sounds and different things, which we also enjoy. But Israel is a blend of South American, African. You've got Spanish Jews that immigrated even down in Latin America. So, and it's a blend of Middle Eastern sounds. So you have Arab influence, very heavy Arab influence as well. And then Jewish tones and textures. So an Israeli sound might be rock and roll, might be reggae. Good friend of mine, a new album that was created in our studio, got Shiloh Ben Hod. Incredible music. It's one of the best albums I think ever made. That's come out of Israel, that we had the privilege of seeing recorded in a studio that the Lord has given us. It's literally, there's Ethiopian sounds on it, because now we have tens of thousands of Ethiopian Jews in the land, and they've brought their flavor and their expressions, and that's kind of been a part of society now. Then you have all these different backgrounds. You have some songs that sound Spanish to me, and even slightly Italian. You have some songs that are just straightforward reggae, actually, some of them. So we're a blend of all different nations, really in a lot of ways in Israel. And then there's specific songs you would hear that you would say, okay, identify that as Middle Eastern, straightforward. And there's a blend of the West as well, so it's represented all in Jerusalem, really. Yeah,
that's a beautiful thing. I was talking to Moshe, who's in I just lost the name of the shop, because I go in every time I'm in Jerusalem. I go and visit him in the old city, Shorashim in the Jewish quarter of the old city, and I always have great conversations with him. He's just a fun guy to talk to, and he said he believed that the redemptive, he didn't use the word redemptive gift, but the redemptive call, but the special thing that God put upon the Jewish people was to be able to draw all the other 70 together.
That's a good point.
And
That's right.
that there was that connection, and you're seeing that.
And we know that is what's going to happen in the
exactly.
ultimate Sukkot, right?
Yeah.
We see that it says every year that the nations will come and be gathered.
Come and gather
in Jerusalem when Messiah returns.
And if they don't, they won't get any rain that year.
That's pretty.
That's a whole other issue and another
thing. But
man,
let's go up.
Thank you so much.
Hey, buddy,
this has been
I love
so good.
Love hanging out.
Been a lot of fun, guys. This has been a conversation with my friend Kobi, and you've seen his information on the bottom of your screen. Make sure you look up Yeshua Israel and look at what they're doing. Look up Ma'as Israel and see if that's something that God would call you to support the poor and the needy that are in Israel. It's on God's heart, and we want to do that. And hey, I know many of you are supporters of streams, and one of the things that we're doing is supporting Israel and doing training in Israel, as well as supporting these ministries and helping them do what you're doing. So thank you. We really appreciate it. So bless you guys. We'll see you next time on Conversations.
I am the root of Jesse. I am the God of Jerusalem, wherein is my name. I am the Counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father. I am your peace and calm. I am he who wipes away your